Hey all, it's Alec Peters, and now for our final panel of AXACON 2019, I am honored to have with us Sally Marshall and Ihnat and Linda Alexander. Sally, of course, is Steve Ihnat's widow, and Linda Alexander is his biographer, and we have a copy of her book, which is The Life and Death of Rising Star Steve Ihnat, Gone Too Soon. Right? That's not the biography of Steve Ihnat. No, it's so. All right. So this is awesome for me. Of course, I love having you, both of you, around. You're amazing, because it makes this all so much special. So for those of you out there, Steve Ihnat, of course, was the original Garth of Izar in the 1968 third season Star Trek episode Whom Gods Destroy. And last year, I was lucky to find on Facebook someone that was promoting Linda's book, and I immediately looked up Linda, found out the book was real, because I was like, wow, someone wrote a biography. This is awesome. And I looked up Linda. Linda came to AXACON, brought Sally with her, and this has just been a wonderful relationship for the past year. So first of all, Sally, how are you doing?
I am doing wonderful, thanks to you.
Oh, thanks to us, maybe. And you've made this whole weekend very special.
Well, thank you, but I will tell you that this whole experience has brought so much of Steve's aura and I just swear he's here somewhere. He was so special to me, but he was so special to many. And he certainly is being brought here from you. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, he's a special part of Star Trek to me. I mean, and last night we had the privilege of watching Whom Gods Destroy with Linda and Sally, and that was really awesome. We had a great time.
Yeah.
That was fantastic, and thank you so much for doing that with us. I think tonight we're going to watch his Outer Limits episodes.
Absolutely.
Right, which was The Inheritors.
The Inheritors.
Which was a second season.
He was Captain Mims.
Yes. So we started watching last night.
Lieutenant Mims.
Lieutenant Mims.
Lieutenant. Okay, so we started watching that last night. So you all need to watch tonight. Maybe we'll have a watch party, because it's on Netflix. Well, it's on Hulu and Amazon Prime, which you all have. So maybe we'll schedule that time. We'll all watch it. It's a two-parter.
2 hours.
Right.
Yeah,
2 hours.
2 hours. So prepare yourselves tonight. And that's great. Okay, so Linda, tell us how the two of you met.
Well, I started to research the book, and when I start to research a book, it's always my habit to get in touch with any living family members. And the first individual I got hold of was Gabby, Sally's daughter, and I found her on Facebook. What would we do without Facebook? And Gabby was very kind, and I explained to her what I was doing, and she passed my information along to Sally. And Sally and I had some long first email conversations, and then we spoke. And as I have said before, Sally decided to trust me, and we went along from there. And the rest is history.
And Sally, what does it mean to you to have Linda write a whole biography, do all that work to memorialize Steve?
It keeps his spirit alive and his talent alive. And very now. I mean, watching it last night could have been right then. I was transported watching you sit. And I was very touched by the scene I saw you shoot yesterday. Very contemplative as you were looking at the men's names. It was very touching to me. And I just imagined his name slipping by.
Thank you. And yes, I mean, I definitely felt the presence of Steve. I thought of Steve. It was important. So for those of you out there, yesterday we shot a scene where Garth is reviewing the casualty reports, and it takes place after the war, but you don't know that. But the whole idea has been that Paul Jenkins has pushed really hard that the idea that I first came up with is that the thing that's unique about Garth is that his crew is the most important thing to him, and he acutely feels every loss. And Paul Jenkins took that and ran with it and really embellished upon that idea. And so when we were doing this scene, which we did the scene because many donors donated to be a casualty in the 4 Years' War. They literally gave us $250 so they could be a name. They could be, and 148 people did that. So we have to shoot this scene to put their real names in there, and they get a little letter home from the admiral. So it's we make it interesting and fun. So to shoot that scene, it was in one way, it was something we needed to do to fulfill the perks, but also it informs the character, and it's important for the character. And Paul did such a wonderful job helping to develop that idea about Garth, and then working with me on that scene. And it's one scene, it's 5 shots, one scene, and no words. It's just Garth reviewing the casualty reports. So it's thinking of those we've lost, and Steve chief among them was really important. So it was wonderful to have Sally on set and Linda on set, and to see it, because I never thought of Axanar necessarily continuing Steve's work until I met the two of you. And then that became really important to me, and then a lot more pressure. But it's wonderful. It's wonderful that we can add that dimension. The thing that I keep telling people, and I want you to tell us about, Linda wrote a whole book on Steve's life, is that if Steve was still alive today, how old would he be today?
84.
84, that's what I was going to say.
85,
84, yeah. If he was alive today, he would basically be Clint Eastwood.
Yes.
Because Clint Eastwood has had a wonderful acting career and then a wonderful directing career. And that was the trajectory Steve was on.
Totally.
I mean, probably and arguably he was more popular than Clint Eastwood in the 60s.
Yes.
And was directing his own movies and all. And obviously he was an amazing talent. So I tell people who don't, because I can mention Steve Ihnat, and people, unless you're a Star Trek fan or a real buff of 60s television, may not know who he is. But when I tell people about this, they go, "Really?" And I go, "No, really. You need to read Linda's book."
Right. Oh, good.
I think it's important to stress here that, I've written at least 3 of these kind of books, and Steve is unquestionably the quote-unquote least well-known, generally speaking, of the people I've written about. But industry-wise, he was over the top, the most well-known within the industry. I had no problem whatsoever getting big names to talk about Steve Ihnat. The very first person that agreed to interview with me was Ed Asner. And within, seconds, Ed Asner was on my telephone and giving me the most fantastic interview. Clu Gallagher. All I had to do was ask Clu Gallagher 5 words, and the man gave me no less than 45 minutes, and I didn't speak. And he was off on a tangent on Steve Ihnat. And Morgan Fairchild. Not Morgan Fairchild, I always do that. Brittany, who was in Dallas. But she was the child in The Inheritors. And Steve was excellent with children. And she compared him to Henry Fonda, the actor. And she said he was an extraordinary actor to work with children. But the point is that with he was so well known in the industry that his peers just appreciated absolutely everything he did, and down to a person, they said that had he lived, quote unquote, that infamous statement, he would be at the top of his realm in today's world. You know, everybody would know who Steve Ihnat was. So, you know, clearly it's sad that he didn't, but he would have lived well beyond our Clint Eastwoods of today.
Thank you for keeping that part alive for us, you know, for those of us that loved him. And indeed, there were many. So I'm very grateful to you.
Well, I'll mention that I have had numerous people over the years since I started this project. The first time I played that role of Garth was 10 years ago. And since then, I've had literally dozens of people say to me, "Oh, you look just like him." And I'm like, okay, I don't see that, but okay.
Well,
But
I can see it.
no.
The cheek.
He's got a resemblance.
Yeah, there's a resemblance.
There's an aura, for
And a
lack of a better
presence.
term.
Yes, there is. There is a presence.
And although I will say there's one photo of me, I don't know which one it was. There was one photo of me, and I go, oh, okay, I see what people are saying. I can see that there's some resemblance. And someone said, well, is that why you liked that character? I said, no, it had nothing to do with why I liked it. I love that character, and it's funny, the line that everyone always repeats is when Captain Kirk in the beginning says Captain Garth, and he says, Lord Garth. So I've heard that hundreds of times. When I say I play Captain Garth, someone says, Lord Garth. I said, no. I said, no, Captain Garth. Because that's, for me, the parts of Whom Gods Destroy, it's interesting. His best performance is as Lord Garth. The thing that I attached myself to was the 2 times in there, or the 2 or 3 times where you see him as he was.
Right.
And I go,
Sameness.
and I got so sucked into that part, the part in the transporter room where Kirk's trying to get through to him, and you see him turn, and he's about to say something, but Kirk's words are getting through to him, and you see who he was. And I'm like, whoa, that I wanted to know who he was. I wanted to know who's that guy he's about to be, who he was.
Right.
I was like, who is that guy? That's fascinating. And it wasn't just that, he's Captain Kirk's hero. It was like, how Steve was playing that guy,
Right. Oh, I do know. And that was one of the very first times I had seen him. And I went, oh, bring him to me. I was smitten, and so they did. No, he had a magnetism about him. That's really one of the words I would have to apply to him and his charisma, truly. Don't you think? Even you saw that.
There was something about the way he was able to act, and that's what you're explaining right here and right now, is that there was something about the man that his acting made you want to know what he was acting about. But it was the man, not the actor, because the man was what was creating that character. It was not the characterization. He could have been creating Donald Duck, for that matter, and you would have wanted to know who Donald Duck was.
Yes.
And that was the whole point of it, because not every actor can do that.
No.
So, and even to this day, like Sally was saying earlier, he's been dead almost 50 some odd years, and here we are sitting talking about him. There's a revival of some sort, and you were just saying earlier, some people are saying, I can walk the streets and tell people about this book, and I'll say, I wrote a book on Steve Ihnat, and they'll say, who's that? I can pick up my iPad and show them a picture, and they say, oh, I know who he is.
Right.
because the face is immediately recognizable. If you lived and watched television in the 60s and early 70s, you know that face. There's no question the man was on your television at least 1 to 2 times a night, virtually every night of the week, because he acted so many times and he was that impressionable. So, there's a time, as the Bible says, there's a time and a season for everything, and I think this is Steve's time and season. There's a revival coming around for whatever reason, and, here we are doing that.
Oddly enough, I remember very clearly coming home with a number of people coming to our house after the funeral. And there he was on the camera. It was airing Bonanza.
Oh.
The first time. It was a brand new one that he had just finished filming. And it was such a shock, kind of, to see him fresh and there and so alive. And so that's what I'm getting here, and it makes me happy.
Oh, well, good. We're
Yeah.
glad that we're glad. It's having you here. It really makes it all special for a lot of us. I think a lot of us understand the import of having you and Linda here, and how it really adds it to.
See how important it is?
That was the ghost of Steve. I'll show you how important it is.
Wow, yes.
Come on in, Steve.
Yeah.
Alec would really like to see you.
Yeah.
So, it just adds another dimension, and I think we've been so fortunate, and it's so interesting the timing of your book. Because if it was 10 years ago, we never would have met you probably, right? But here's your book, and here we are doing Axanar and finishing this wonderful story. And let me tell you, I just have to say, because I was thinking of this before, but in the new Star Trek TV show, there's a point at where one of the characters looks and calls up the main character calls up the name of the greatest captains in Starfleet history, and they don't list Garth. And I'm like, well, listen, everyone who watched that episode knows he explored more new worlds than any other starship captain. How's he not on that list, CBS? And I was like so offended. I was offended for the character. I was offended for Steve. I was like, that's ridiculous. But I guarantee you the reason he wasn't on that list was because of Axanar. Because CBS doesn't, because they just have a bone to pick with us because we're so good. He's always on it.
Yeah.
Oh, he's always, anyone is.
That's one thing that amazes me, because this man created this character one time only.
That's it.
And you still see this character all over the place, all the time, on the top of fandoms lists. How does that happen? Just one time. And he's still, when you ask people, what do you remember Steve Ihnat for? Garth of Izar. That's the first thing that people say to me when they recognize Steve Ihnat. So, you got to wonder. And it's not like he did that 2, 3, 4, 7 times. He did it one time.
Right. Yeah, it was not a series that he appeared in every week. It was that one time, just like you said. The other thing is, I would go to the bank to cash a check of, the residuals. And invariably, the girl behind the, what do you call it?
The counter.
Yeah, would say, excuse me, did you know Steve Ihnat? Were you related? I said, yeah, he was my husband. Oh, I loved him. I loved him. And I swear to you, that was not one time, was not 5 times, at least a dozen or more times.
That's, wow.
That's a lot,
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And it kind of has been like Steve wanted to remind me of him, and he sent me letters that he had written the day before he passed away. The day before that, he wrote me a letter. And the last letter I got was the longest, and he had sent it, like I said, the day before. And what happened? 6 months after he passed away, the letter showed up in my mailbox.
Wow.
I'm not done with you, Sally. Really. And here he is again. I'm not done with you, Sally. And thank you for that.
Oh,
He's
well,
not done with the world.
No.
No. Well, listen. What we're all doing is helping keeping his spirit alive. Oh, we got some. Let's see what everyone out there is saying. Yes, the JJ Universe acknowledged Captain Garth. Yes, he's actually his character actually appeared in a novel. It appeared in. Oh, we have some notes here. Okay.
Oh.
Oh no, that's great. All right, so let's see. So the first question is, I'll rephrase this question because I know you knew him before his Star Trek work. I will tell everyone how you met
Oh.
because it's a great story.
A good girlfriend of mine. Yeah, read the book. Exactly.
Oh, and before you do, where can we get the book, Linda? On Amazon? Is that?
You can definitely get it on Amazon, Amazon.com. Look up the title. It's there, easy to get.
There you go.
There you
Linda
go.
Linda Alexander. Just search Linda Alexander, and you'll find the book.
Right. She called me up and said, Sally, there's a play in town. Let's go. I've got tickets. Great. I went to the play, and it was a horseshoe theater. It was a famous little theater in Hollywood called the Horseshoe Theater. And I looked across the room, and there was this man, and he was with this blonde. And I thought, that's completely wrong.
Notwithstanding.
He needs
No
to
offense,
be.
Erin.
No. Oh, no. Or Crystal, absolutely. He needs to be with me. And I poked my friend and said, see that man over there? She said, oh, yeah. I said, he's going to be mine. And break time comes, we all go and get a drink, are waiting, for the second act. And the play is long forgotten. It was called McBird. And he walked up to me. Walked up to me after I had said that to her and said, may I have your number?
No, he said something else
Wait,
first.
what did he? Oh, yeah. Oh, how could I forget this? He said, I think I love you. Even better. Was the best thing ever. And I turned and looked at him and said, I think you should. What? Come on. That was the opening of all time. And he went on
That was
down
it?
his business. That was it
You
for
gave
that
him-
moment.
You gave him your number.
Oh, no.
No.
Later, he walked up to me and he said, may I have your number? And I said, yes, you may. And I said, here, you'll have to write it down. And he said, no, I won't. I will remember it. I had told you yesterday he had a photographic memory,
Right.
and he would remember it. Well, sure enough, he did. And he called me the next day and said, I would love to meet you. Would you like to meet me somewhere? And I said, sure. And we went to a really well-known restaurant and club, kind of, called The Cock and the Bull. And I thought, well, that's appropriate because I'm a Taurian. So there's the bull. So the plot she thickens. And we got into an argument because he said to me, I'd love to take you up to my place and show you my paintings. And I went, oh, for God's sakes, you're not doing the my paintings line on me, are you? Yeah. Well, sure enough, I didn't know it at the time, but he was a wonderful artist. And so we kind of grumped at each other, and the night ended. And I got home, and I was so upset. My babysitter was there, and I said, I've just blown the most important thing in my whole life, I'm sure of it. And she said, what's his last name? I said, I don't have any idea. Because Ihnat, what kind of a name is Ihnat? I knew Steve. So I called information. I said, do you have a Steve? And I fumbled around, and she said, oh dear, no. I have a lot of Steves. Do you have a last name? I said, I wish. So I hung up the phone, and he called me. And he said, well, I guess I should have followed you home to make sure that you got home safely. I said, well, that is the least you could have done. And 2 nights later, he came over for dinner, and the rest of it is nightclub history. Yeah.
So the next question is, what was Steve's favorite role?
One was the lieutenant.
Oh, okay.
Lieutenant. He played Lieutenant Mims, and it was The Outer Limits. One was also the Star Trek, because he could just chew the scenery.
Yeah.
And he had a blast with it. He had a wonderful time with it.
That's the kind of role any actor really relishes.
Absolutely. And another one was sadly an hour and a half, I think it was an hour, 90-minute movie that was made in Canada just before he died. And it was very touching. And in fact, the oil companies refused to allow him, or not just him, but for the show to be put on the air, because his best friend got blown up. He was a line worker. He was just a big, gruff lineman.
Was a strike breaker.
Yeah, right. But he wasn't a
No,
strike.
but the
yeah,
movie was.
yeah. It was called Strike. Oh man.
It was shown once on Canadian television.
Canadian, one time, and then after that, never again. Sadly.
Do we know anything about this movie? Is there?
I
It's
have
still
a
around?
copy. Sally gave me a copy.
Oh wow!
So you'll get a copy.
Oh well. Oh, I can't wait to
It
see
is.
that.
It's very, very good.
Very
Oh
good.
wow!
Yeah.
Okay.
He's striking in it.
Oh.
I couldn't resist.
Yeah. Striking. But you will enjoy it. And again, he said, take my lines away. They're in the first part of the film. He says very little, just on occasion with his wife, and it's very touching. So you'll enjoy.
Now I have got to imagine that at that time, just from my own experience, I mean, I was born in 1960, and I grew up watching TV in the 60s and 70s, and there were certain actors you just saw all the time, like John Colicos or John Vernon or Anthony Zerbe, or these guys who were just working actors.
Totally.
They were in everything, right? Or, Clint Eastwood, or, there were a lot of the Charles Bronson, right? Guys who were coming
Right.
up through the ranks, and they were just in everything. They were in Bonanza, and they were in Rawhide, and they were in Big
Right.
Valley, and there were so many westerns back then, or they were in the Outer Limits, or over and over. So you just saw them over and over. And Steve's phone must have been ringing off the hook.
All the time.
Getting
He
work
had to-
was not a problem.
He could work every week of the year, literally. And once in a while I'd say, well, why don't you get a Hawaii Five-O so we could go to Hawaii? We would enjoy that, And,
You got the Kona Coast movie, right?
well, he did, but that was when we were first dating.
Oh, okay.
And that was a great trip, yeah, because he invited me along. And, yes, so yay.
Played a bad.
Yay for me. He played a very bad guy, but he was not a bad guy.
Okay, so the first, here's another question. What did you like most about his work?
His vulnerability, his absolute commitment to what he was doing and to the person he was playing and the other actors with whom he was playing. And he was so strong that he could walk away. He didn't, but he could turn away. He could say, no, those lines aren't important, and still be so powerful that you couldn't help but be drawn into this man, whomever he was playing.
And that is a rarity. I mean, listen, I talk often about acting, and as an amateur and as someone who is very left brain, and acting being a very right brain
No.
process, as you know, as an actress, for me, it's very difficult. And I had the good fortune to train with Howard Fine, one of the best acting coaches in Hollywood, and boy, Howard struggled with me. And he said, Alec, you live in your left brain, and I'm trying to get you to live in your right brain. And it took a long time. But one of the things that I'm very clear about, and he really expressed, was that, and Richard Hatch, my good dear friend who passed away,
Yeah.
who played Karn in Axanar, he said, Richard told me, because he was about 10 years younger than Steve, but he said when he was going through acting school in Santa Monica, he said there was a sign above the door, and it said, no acting allowed.
Yeah.
Right? Because as acting is not about pretending. Acting is not about acting. Acting is about honesty.
That's
it's about
right.
the truth.
It's about being.
It's
yeah.
about being, and conveying the truth. And what Steve does so brilliantly in all of his work, it's honest. There's no, it is like he is.
Yeah.
And when I interviewed Clu Gallagher, and like I said, he just went off. But he was your acting coach at one time, wasn't he?
No,
no,
he
but-
was a friend.
Oh, but he said thought he said that he taught you for a while. But he said, and I quote, he called Steve a shit kicker. That's the way he said his acting style was. Because he said that Steve didn't just stand there and read his lines. He said he wouldn't have his lines, he would know his lines, but he would stand there and he'd say a bit, and then he'd stop, and he'd look down at the ground, and he'd rustle his feet, and he'd turn his head, and, like he was thinking and working it out, and then he'd stand up and say a few more lines, and they'd turn around, basically kicking the shit. It would be, you could see the mind working as opposed to just acting, reading the lines. And, he was fascinated by the way Steve did his work. He said Steve was a consummate professional in what he did, and you don't see that in most people that are on the screen. He said, he couldn't say enough about the way Steve did his work, as opposed to a lot, because apparently he was an acting coach,
Yes,
about
he
the way
was.
a lot of people, and a lot of the people that he worked with. So, that was his particular comment on Steve's acting abilities.
Which again, it's saying acting abilities is such a misnomer.
Yes.
Or his
Right?
abilities.
His
period.
abilities, yeah, because it's really his
It's
his
a-
ability to be present.
It's drawing out human nature.
Yeah. Yeah, and as Howard said, excuse my language, Howard said dredging up all that shit,
Right.
and Howard would always say, acting costs you, and
Yes.
it does, because it's, well, even yesterday, as going through the casualty reports, I hear I have to dredge up grief, right? Who wants to
That's
dredge
right.
up grief? Who wants to relive the loss and all that? It's not something you want to do. You try and push it down and suppress
Right.
it and everything. And here in acting, we got to go down there and pull it out
Yeah.
and just keep reliving that crap. So
Yeah.
and the challenge with Steve is that he makes it look so easy.
He does. Yeah.
He always made it.
absolutely did.
It was just, he was always there, and you just, and that's nowadays when you watch whatever it is you're watching. There's many good actors, but the ones who really are just, are drawn in and know that there's something special there. That's so rare, and that's what Steve had.
He even did it with my daughter. When we first got married, it would be, he would take on the job of driving her to school on the way to the studio. And we had just had a horrible earthquake. I mean, it was really a bad earthquake. And my daughter developed this blinking twitch. And she also decided that she was a puppy dog. And she would go along in the car with him, and she would do that and do that. And then she'd lean over and give him a lick. And lick his face, just like your little one,
Yeah.
your little boy there.
Pee-wee, just
like that. And I would be in the car behind because I'd be going to the grocery store. And it was so sweet because he would, on occasion, go and rub her head like he was.
Petting the dog.
Exactly. Didn't say, don't do that, but he was communicating with that child that Morgan talked about.
Yeah, he was incredible with children.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Now, on set, in
Real life, I mean, in real life too, but on set, every person that I talked to, I noticed how amazing he was when he acted with children. And that was the one thing that to me, it was kind of sad because, he did have his own son, but he wasn't able to realize that relationship. He had Gabby, which they were realizing that relationship, which sadly didn't come to fruition. But yet, I talked to 2 or 3 different actors that were children at the time that had absolutely nothing but the most glowing reports of how this man interact. There was one scene in The Inheritors, yes, you have to watch it, people, there's no question, that he's with her in the room, and he's taking her out of this room where he's not supposed to take her out. She's blind. And he puts her foot up on his leg to put her shoes on and tie her shoes. And it's, she's blind, she doesn't know him, but she has a trust in him. And it's, when I was watching this, I'm wondering, was that in the script, or was that just something he did? And I was figuring it had to be in the script because of the way he did it. And when I interviewed her, I asked her, I said, was that something that he was told? She said, no, it was just something that he inherently did because apparently he felt that that's what he should be doing. Everything he did in that scene, he did because he felt that that's what a man should gently do with the child that he was trying to coerce in a good way into what was needed to be done in that particular scene. So it was, again, human nature that he felt should be done in the proper way with an adult and a child. He just knew how to work children.
Yeah. He was a very kind man. And, you know, he played a lot of murderers.
Yeah,
And
that was one first thing I said to Sally. He plays such nasty people.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Why does he do that? She said, he does it so well, but I don't know why, because he's such a nice guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And he would get stopped by police
Oh, that's...
all the time. They'd pull him over because they'd see his face and go, ah, I know I saw him in some room, you know, and he'd be,
Try to give him a ticket.
yeah, and they'd pull up his name and everything else, and then one of them would go, wait a minute,
You're that
didn't
actor.
I see you last night on Bonanza or, you know, Outer Limits, whatever. And sure enough, and
Can
he
I
said,
have your autograph?
yeah, can I have your autograph? And it won't be on a ticket, you know. So, yeah, he was a very sweet, kind man.
And we mentioned last night, so he was tall for an actor.
Yeah,
Even these days, you know, most leading men are under 5'10", and Steve was 6'1 and a half.
yeah, he
So-
wants that half.
Yeah. Like a little kid,
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
I'm 4'10" and a half.
And I'm 4.5 years old.
Yes, right. We got what? Okay, so he was kind. Give me a couple other adjectives to describe Steve, the ones that jump out at you. Besides handsome, kind, brilliant actor.
He was very sensitive, and very loving. He was
Gary Clark
really,
had a heck of a sense of humor. They were
Oh.
crazy together.
yeah, with Gary Clark, who was an actor of that era as well. And they were roommates, and they were wild together, and they had a great time. Yeah, they got in trouble. Not in any real trouble.
Right.
No.
Boy trouble.
Boy
Yeah,
trouble.
boy trouble, exactly. But again, he could tell a joke better than anybody I ever spoke with, because he could do accents. He could be from Ireland, from Scotland, from London, you know, wherever it was, Russian. I mean, he could tell a story, a Shaggy Dog story, which goes on and on, and I never got tired of hearing them.
Great sense of humor. Tell us something else about him that maybe we don't know, because you know we only know him from what we
Yeah.
see on screen. He sounds like just such an evolved human being.
He was very evolved. He believed in allowing, he had a niece who was very ill. And one day he said to me, would you like to go down to Mexico with us? I want to get her the Laetrile treatments. And he would try anything to help her to get well. He cared about the world. He very much cared about the world. He would have been involved now.
He would have been an activist.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Because he then made the film Do Not Throw Cushions into the Ring, and it was the Mexico thing, only different. He changed it for his sisters. But yes, he was very much an activist.
where did Steve see himself? He passed in 72.
Two.
So where do you think Steve saw himself 20 years later?
Oh, I'm sure because he wrote as well and directing. He would have, I don't know that he would have given up acting, but he sure as heck would have directed. Yeah.
Did he talk to you actively about, look, here's where I want to go, here's what I want to do
Yes.
more of? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was more directing, it was more writing.
It was more writing and directing, and he'd even edit everything. He did it all. I hung negative because in those days it was negative. So it was a family thing. We did it all. And in fact, all the ads that he took out in the trades, he put them all together.
Oh,
They'd be full-page ads.
wow.
And, he was just a talented man. He could paint. He loved music. He was just wide open for everything.
Adventurous.
Yeah, very much so.
Now, Linda, from your perspective, having done all the work in this, tell us something about Steve that we didn't see on screen that we should know about him as a man.
Well, I think that there was just a many layers to him that weren't clearly obvious. He was very talented. I think there were a lot of things that I found out that weren't like credits that you don't see. Like there was a movie called of course I'm having a brain dump at this exact moment. But it was a war film, and he was called by Dino De Laurentiis to go overseas to take part in this movie, and he got the role. And Robert Mitchum starred in it. It was a war movie, and between the time that he got the role and the time Anzio, that was the Anzio.
Yeah.
That was the ultimate title of them. It didn't start out as Anzio. It was something else. But I don't know. I have never been able to find out why, but Steve was not in the role. But I did learn that another individual who was in the role, a fairly well-known actor, I can't remember his name, but he was called into the role. He was called over there, and he sat for days, and they didn't do anything with him. And he finally told them that if you don't use me, I'm just going home. And they finally wrote him a small part. So my guess is that they may just have called him in as he just may have gotten tired of it. I don't know. But he went over there and he got a free trip overseas for it via Dino De Laurentiis. But there were parts that he was supposed to have had. There were movies that he was given.
Right.
There were pilots that got chopped down and never actually happened.
A lot of them.
There were 2 or 3 times that he was so close to starring in his own television show
Series, yeah.
that were his. They were given to him.
Yeah.
They were, you're the star.
Wow.
And they were pulled.
Really?
That happens a lot in Hollywood.
Yeah.
There'll be, one was the police story with
Yes,
Gary.
with Gary
And,
Clark.
they were starring in it. They were, buddy police
Yeah, he
stories.
gave Gary the second role on that.
Yeah.
But
So-
and John Vernon, Hunter,
Yeah.
that thing was entirely developed for Steve Ihnat. And for whatever reason, when they cut it down and regurgitate it and everything else, John Hunter was the star, Steve Ihnat was the co-star. I have no idea why. I've never been able to find out. And it was turned into a second-hand type of deal, and brought out after Steve died.
Yeah,
So, who knows what's in the mind of Hollywood, but,
right.
it was what it was. But there were a lot of little secrets of that sort that I found out.
Was there any one role that he turned down that he regretted turning down?
I didn't find out anything that he turned down. I mean, the man was taking so much work that I don't think he breathed between roles.
No. He'd go from one set to the other. It seems to me that there was one, but I don't know which show it was, where he went literally from one stage to another. They were shooting another total
At the same
show.
studio.
Yes. Yeah, and Scotty was the policeman in the gate at Universal, and he would always say, "Hi, Mrs. Ihnat," and Steve's in, and he pushed me on through. They knew Steve.
Oh, I'm sure they
Yeah,
did.
and he knew them. He made sure to know.
Oh, sure, because of his
them
memory.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Great. Well, we're at the end of our time, and I want to say thank you both. It's always a pleasure doing these with you, and we'll have to do something tonight. We'll have to do a little watch party tonight of
Yes.
Inheritors.
The
So if
Inheritors.
you're watching on the live stream, let's tune in tonight, and we will all do a Inheritors watch party. I want to thank you. Love you guys. You're the best. And
Thank you.
thank you all for watching. And we appreciate you as fans, and we appreciate Sally and Linda be here. Make sure you get the book and read the book, because it will enlighten you, and you will really. It's one of those things you go, wow, I never knew this, and it's going to be worth your time. So.
It's a great love story.
It is a love story.
It's a
It truly
love
is a
story.
love story.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you both, and we will see you all around. Live long and prosper. We are wrapped.